Hello, friends. I am Chevee. Welcome to my shed. How are you today? How's life in your world and how's things where you are? Hope it's fantastic. Everything here is great. Poland. Prior to going to Spiel Essen, I spent a week in Poland. My friend, when he asked me, hey, would you like to come to Spiel this year? My answer, well, it took a little bit. I had a conversation with my wife, I had a conversation with my kids, like, what do you guys think? And everybody was like, yeah, you want to go. And I said, yeah, I'll go. So when I told him yes, he then proceeded to ask me possibly the dumbest question I've ever been asked in my entire life. And that was, do you want to go straight to Essen or do you want to come early and spend some time in Poland? Because for me, this trip was more about seeing friends and playing games than it really was about the fair. The fair was great, don't get me wrong, I did a review on it yesterday, had a wonderful time, and would love to go back. But the truth of the truth of it all is, it came down to the people. Like spending time with friends, playing games, exploring, you know, picturesque countrysides and seeing sights was the main reason I wanted to go. The fair was its own thing. It was like two separate vacations or two separate trips plugged together, right? So I spent a full week in Poland, Wednesday to Wednesday. And I have thoughts. And those thoughts are simple. It was a beautiful place. The more time I have spent talking to my friends, if you don't know, specifically we're talking about Ignacy and Mary. Ignacy is the founder, CEO, president. Ignacy is Portal Games. Portal Games, who I've been working with for alongside for 10 years now. They're the ones that invited me over. So Mary's his wife. They're the ones that invited me over. And so I got to spend a week in their kind of village house. They had a house in the village, and then they moved into the city. And so after these 10 years of talking to him and hearing about Poland, the parallels between Poland and West Virginia are very, very similar. Specifically his area of Poland. He lives in the area of known as Silesia, which was kind of its own little sort of pseudo kingdom at some point, but it was the majority of that area grew up during the Industrial Revolution, just like West Virginia. It grew up through coal mining, just like West Virginia. The boom happened, people moved there, coal was found, they found salt mines also. We don't have salt mines here that I'm aware of. But this huge industrial boom happened. And then, of course, just like in West Virginia, it all collapsed. And so Poland, that area of Poland specifically, is a depressed economy. People are fleeing. Like the population is in steep decline, just like West Virginia. There's not opportunity. There's a lot of the similarities are surreal. On top of that, the terrain is similar. It is that area is north of the Alps. It's west of whatever the mountains are in Poland. Very similar to my area, rolling hills. Their hills are a little shallower. Our hills are a little higher, but for the most part, driving down the road there felt like driving down the road in West Virginia. And I mentioned this to him, and I mentioned this to everybody I've talked to about it. My time in Poland, it felt like being home, except everything was about 10 degrees off. Everything was just slightly wrong. Their guardrails are shaped slightly differently. Their power lines were built slightly differently. Their fences were built slightly differently. The forests were forests, but the trees were not recognizable species. Animals were missing that I'm familiar with. Like there was all these little things that said this is so comfortable and so familiar, but yet just slightly different, just slightly off. And so we spent time in this village. I can't tell you the name of the village. I mean, I could maybe if I thought about it, but it was a weird Polish name. That's where they used to live. They lived there for like 10 years before moving to the city because their daughter is in high school and needs to have access to friends and culture and whatever. And living out in a village is not easy for a teenager. I recognize that living where I live, right? So we stayed in this village house that they haven't lived in for a few years now, and it was beautiful countryside, farmland, just this quaint little place. And we hung out, played games, and did lots of sightseeing. I got to see castles, which was like when he asked me what I wanted to do, I said I want to, or what I wanted to see and do. I said I want to see castles and I want to play games with friends. Like that's it. Like this was not my European tour. This was my let's visit my friend's home and see what their area of the world is like, and on top of that, see castles. So I got to see three castles. We saw. I don't remember the names. I will try to put the names in if I remember to put pictures and stuff in. One was just this little lord's castle. When I first saw it, it was the first castle I went to. It was like, oh my God, look at this. There's this huge tower and this courtyard and all this stuff. But when we saw the other two castles, that thing looked like a boathouse. It was just like this little thing. The second castle we saw was this gigantic complex with rooms everywhere. It was really fascinating. And then the third castle that we saw was in Krakow, and it was a former king's castle. This was like straight out of what you think of when you think of a castle that you've seen in movies. Gigantic complex with rolling hills and gardens and cathedral and all this other stuff behind walls. It was a beautiful, beautiful place. So cool. I got to see castles. I got to see some of the original king's treasures, like the armory and that sort of stuff. That was neat. But the takeaway for me, the thing that really struck me about Poland was, one, it took me 3 days to see my first police officer. 3 days. The police presence is basically, I don't want to say it's not needed, but they're just not there. My friend Rafal, he took me on Saturday to a neighboring town. So Ignacy and Mary live near Gliwice, Poland. My friend Rafal lives in Katowice, which is like a half hour away. So he took me to Katowice, and we wandered around there. And we walked past like a concert, like an outdoor stage, venue stuff. Zero police presence. Like, just doesn't... that struck me as strange. The other thing that struck me was how clean it was. There's not litter on the streets. There's nothing. Like, it's just a clean space everywhere you go. There's not vagrants on the streets. I live in a town with 20,000 people, and there are vagrants here. If you go to a city anywhere near here, there's just vagrants on every corner. People smoking sleeping in sleeping bags and doorsteps. There's zero of that. Saw absolutely none of that. The city felt very clean. All the cities I visited felt very clean, very safe, very beautiful. The interesting thing, though, was, like I said, we were in an area that grew up during the Industrial Revolution. So these cities were all modern cities. They all grew up at the same time as America. They're hundreds of years old, not thousands of years old. So they have wide streets and modern thoroughfares. It felt very normal, except, again, just slightly off. And I think that the similarities, or the differences were maybe some of the communist block housing type stuff, the like hard angled facades was part of that. But it felt very... everywhere we went felt very safe. Very, very, very safe. And that was great. That was beautiful. Saw cathedrals. I went in a couple of them. I'm not necessarily a religious person that way, but I was definitely very interested in seeing them because I know that their cathedrals are these huge monuments. The thing that really struck me about them was just how modern they looked. Meaning that we went to a cathedral that was built in the 1300s, and it looked like it was built in the 80s. Like, it looked brand new. It was mind-boggling how perfectly this cathedral was built, even though it was 800 years old. And, castles. For me, finding things like like when we went traveling around and stopped at gas stations, I enjoyed going in the gas station and just looking at all of the stuff. Like I really wanted to see normal people living normal everyday. Like what is in your gas stations? And guess what? The same stuff, just different, right? Like they have different types of candy bars, different types of chips, but it's still the same aisles with here's some jerky, here's some whatever. Found chips that I loved. I really wish I could get here, specifically onion flavored chips and paprika flavored chips. I would die for those on a regular basis. I'm not paying the prices that I'm finding on Amazon for those things. So if you have a source for paprika and onion flavored chips, please let me know. But I mean, it was a beautiful, beautiful time. It was an absolutely beautiful country full of wonderful people. And it was the first time I've been anywhere where there was no English. Like, none of the signs are written in English. There's just, there's, the people, I was not in a touristy area. We did go visit Krakow quite a few times, but for the most part in Gliwice and everywhere else, I was not in a touristy area. So nobody there is speaking English by, expecting to run into an American. So that was really fascinating for me. It was really interesting to be in such a place. It was, yeah, I could definitely recommend Poland. It would be great if you knew somebody there who speaks their language, because otherwise it's going to be pretty difficult. I would say that all of the younger people, especially like people who, Ignacy's kids, I think his son is 21 now, and his daughter is 15. They speak very good English. Like just you could have full. They're very fluent in English, and I think the younger generations would be fine. But the older people, it's hit or miss, right? The food, we had lots of food. Ignacy wanted me to try a lot of things. I've found a Polish place at the North Market in Columbus, Ohio, and I go there every year and have gołąbki, which is this cabbage roll. And I've been loving it for years, pierogies, that sort of stuff. I got to have real Polish gołąbki the first night I was there. Mary bought it for me, and it was so much better than what I get in Columbus. Doesn't devalue what I get in Columbus, but just so much better. I had that. I had Big O stew, which is a hunter's stew, just a fantastic cabbage sauerkraut stew. I forget the name of this thing. I'll try to remember to put the name on the screen. It is a pork fat spread that's made with like apples, and I think they said pine nuts and some crispy pork bits that you just spread like butter on bread, and it was fantastic. I had multiple types of soups, chicken soup that was really fantastic. The one soup that Ignacy really wanted me to try was called like I don't remember. I'll put it on the screen. Was very good, kind of a sour. There a lot of sour flavors in their cuisine, and a rollada, which was just a rolled up, just so much amazing stuff. There was no Polish street food. I saw Bavarian pretzel stands, but I didn't stop to get one of those, and lots of kebab shops, which I'll talk to you about that when I talk to you about Germany. But a kebab shop was not what I expected when I got to Germany and had a kebab. But yeah, what a fantastic place. I would die to go back there again someday in the future and just hang out, like just experience things. Oh, a couple more things. One, their McDonald's are all green. Very often, like, and I've discovered that's a European thing. McDonald's rebranded in Europe and made all of their stuff yellow and green. All their buildings are green, their signs are green. It is an eco-friendly version of McDonald's, and that kept tripping me up. Like, why is McDonald's green? And the other thing was a complete lack of animals. It was really strange for me to be in a wilderness area like that and not see deer and groundhog and raccoons and squirrels like everywhere I look. It took me until the last day in Poland. So we were leaving for Germany on Wednesday. I woke up that morning and went for a walk and finally saw a few roe deer. And roe deer are these tiny little deer. They're the cutest little things ever. Not even half the size of an American whitetail or black-tailed deer. Just a tiny little deer. Finally got to see some. I saw no other wildlife though, like birds obviously, but no groundhogs, no rabbits, none of that stuff. So Yeah. I could probably talk for hours, and there's a lot more little things that I saw. But if you have specific questions, put those in the comments, and I'll try to answer them. That was my time in Poland. Thank you for being here as always. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, being amazing friends and wonderful people. I really appreciate you. And I'll see you again tomorrow. Today's word you should know sounds smart is saphist. It is an adjective meaning sounding reasonable yet pleasantly false. One can argue that what is learned in law school is largely the skill of making saphist arguments that the jury can believe. Saphist, S-O-P-H-I-T-I-S-T. So I would have said sophist, but this pronunciation guy specifically says saphist. So is that, I guess that's correct? I think I've heard it before, but yeah.